thing. That's all been the genius engineers and chemists at Illumina.
Okay, so maybe if you could take a minute and just walk us through a little bit of the economics around a full test, so a full cycle from sample collection to the library prep to the actual processing and the output. What are the individual components that go into both the revenue and the cost side of running a test all the way through?
So you're talking about what Illumina's cost of revenue might be, or what the end user's revenue and cost might be?
Both.
So I can't get into too many details about Illumina's cost, but most chemistries of this nature, particularly sequencing chemistries and molecular biology reagents, they have margins in the high 80s to the 90s. So almost anything that's a kit that's not a commodity, and next-gen sequencing is not at the level of a commodity. The sequencing kits, the library prep kits are incredibly high-margin products. So if you're just looking at what the cost of these kits might be, just know that these types of biotech companies don't settle for low margins, unless it's a commodity. So 80, 90, 95% margins on their kits that they're selling, both library prep and for sequencing. When you're looking at what the end user is doing, they have a sample that they need to extract DNA from. There's multiple kits that do that. You might be looking anywhere from $10 to $100 per sample, depending on the technology being used to extract the DNA. Then you have library prep. I need to make that DNA sequenceable on an Illumina instrument, and that can be anywhere from $10 to $20 to several $100s per sample. Again, depending on what it is that I want to do, what type of sequencing, what instrument it's going up, and the complexity of the DNA sample. So ideally, if it's blood draw or saliva, a very high quality DNA that can come out of that. If it's, they're extracting DNA from a tooth from someone that's been buried for 1,000 years or from an extinct animal, the DNA is in more of a precarious state. It requires a lot more, care, and that could be more expensive. Then sequencing costs, once the library is ready, the sequencing costs are the same depending on what instrument you put it on. So on the low end, a sequencing kit can be several $100s, and it all depends on. So another advantage of an Illumina platform, similar to other technologies, is you're not just putting one patient on a system. Usually, they call multiplex. So say you have 500 different samples, you can put them all on the same sequencing run, and now you're amortizing those costs for that entire run over 500 patient samples. But it also depends on how much data you want to get out. I can put in one sample and get out 500 samples worth of data, or I can put in 500 samples and get one sample's worth of data from each. So it's kind of like a mile wide and a foot high, or a mile high and a foot wide kind of thing. So that changes the cost. But on the low end, one of those sequencing cartridges can cost hundreds to low thousands. But when you get to the higher end instruments, you're spending, tens of thousands of dollars sometimes on one run, because you have quite a lot of chemistry in there. You might be sequencing, multiple genomes, human genomes on one run. So unless you're looking at a specific application, it runs the gamut of, several $100s per sample at scale, the whole race to the $100 genome, to, several $1,000s per sample. That given the level of complexity and the preciousness of the sample and the integrity of the test being run.
Okay. And so if how much do you know about immunosequencing?
It depends. So